Hello and welcome to our 5 minutes with Ekaterina war vlog about Dnipro, the central Ukraine. I'm recording this video on the 10th of May, and before the war, before the full-scale invasion, even it was my favorite time of the year because we would have long holidays. There will be a day off for the International Labor Day after the 1st of May, and then there will be one day off for commemorating the end of the Second World War. In the latest years, it would be May 8, but before it was May 9. And also, this is the time when the nature is waking up and it will be warm. Everybody will go to the barbecues. And if you have the extended holidays, if you have a few days off, you can go even to the seaside, to Odessa or to Crimea, or just you will go to the bank of the Dnipro River and you will have barbecue with your friends there. And even earlier, even before this, I liked this holiday a lot because I still had my grandfather and my grandmother, and they were the veterans of the Second World War. And we would bring them the lilac flowers. It was a very traditional thing to do, and there will be some again commemoration. And it was just in general, it was very nice time of the year. It was very nice as a family reunion. It's very nice weather in Ukraine, not too hot, not too cold. And this time is a very special time in my life and for me in general. But regretfully, after the full-scale invasion, or even after the war started in 2014, with the Russian occupation of Crimea, we stopped having this beautiful place to go. We stopped having this opportunity to go and visit Crimea for my holidays, and it's still occupied, so still not accessible. And now Russians deprived us these holidays at all because in Ukraine we don't have this day off while the war is ongoing. It's from the position of security, so we don't have day off for this public holidays. And also, of course, it's not safe anymore, and you just cannot travel across Ukraine because Russians are targeting trains, and also these places where we would go, they're not safe anymore. The Dnipro River near Nikopol is shelled constantly, and even just going to the different places, different villages, that it used to be very safe and it used to be okay. Yeah, now it is practically impossible. But if we even not speculate about this past 4 years, but focus on what is happening this year, regretfully, right before the May holidays, before this time of commemorating the Second World War, the beginning of May was very difficult in Dnipro, very intense, because Russians were bombing us with everything, literally. So there were missiles of the kind of caliber, and caliber is big ballistic missiles. There were drones, and these a few weeks leading to the 8th of May, they were targeting, Russians were targeting specifically civilians, so they killed people in the residential buildings, they destroyed a few petrol stations, they were targeting pretty much civilian buildings. There was a school targeted, the two universities that were hit, and basically the level of just recklessness was to the point, or level of feeling that they are not punishable and nothing will happen to them, was to the extent when they killed civilians in Dnipro, they immediately showed the footage of their drones showing that actually the drone had a camera and it was manually landing. Basically, it was operated manually and it was targeting specifically civilians at that moment. Which is very hard to just to think about it, because if you just think that it's a mistake and something happened and it wasn't actually the target, and it's just easier to understand. And when you think that no, actually there was the human, or if we can call it human, there was an operator doing it, and these operators saw that they're going to kill the civilians, and they were specifically even putting this image online to show off and to show that they did it intentionally. So it just I don't know, it's not the correct word to say demotivates, but it basically just destroys my faith in humanity in general. And this bombings and the siren was on almost 24/7, so there were fewer hours without the siren that with the siren. And again, just thinking that they target civilian infrastructure and that you can be the next target is very pressing, and it's definitely the form of terror. And the whole point of it was to terror population. This does work. I have a student who at that time went to Kiev, and usually it's a pretty much uneventful trip. You just board in the train, and then a few hours later you will be in the capital. But her train was stopped in the field, right in the middle of nowhere. All the passengers were evacuated. They have to go outside to wait. She thankfully waited for about 20 minutes, not for a long time, but you can be evacuated outside and spend even an hour, because there will be the Russian drone on radar, which will be targeting that train. And some of the trains, so there were two cases when the trains were actually hit by the drone this way. So it was very difficult mentally, and despite the situation with the electricity is very, very bad. So there are no blackouts, and if there will be no electricity, it would be connected with some works, with some plant works, and the weather is very bad. It's very warm. It's about 23 degrees today, for example, in Dnipro. I mean, and the situation with electricity is very bad. Everything is still in the shops, and you just should enjoy life. You should enjoy this time and go to, like, to have your barbecue outside. But there is no mood. Everybody is very depressed, and people just don't want to do it because of this level of danger. Because again, somebody lost their loved ones in this bombings, and it's just not the proper mood to do anything. And at the same time, listening to all these Russian propagandists and Russian politicians talking about the truth and saying, oh, let's have the silence, a radio silence moment, because we would like to have a parade in Moscow. And the shameful parade obviously have taken place yesterday. If you watched it, you saw that there was no military cars or equipment, and it was the worst in terms of attendance by the international community, even among the Putin's allies. So basically, they just wanted to have this show for the sake of show, because the veterans of the war, they are already dead from the old age, and nobody who did participate in the war, they wouldn't even just watch it on TV, because they are not around anymore. And in this preparation for this shameful parade, Russians said, okay, let's not bomb each other. And Ukraine actually said, okay, we are fine with it, despite Ukraine said, let's start on the 5th of May. But Russians said no, and they were bombing us with drones and bombing different cities, not only Dnipro. And then on the 8th of May, they killed a civilian man in Ukraine right before, before this moment when they have to stop bombing. And they stopped bombing us with the long-range missiles, which means that in Dnipro it was calm. That indeed was calm, and it was a relief. And it was a time when there were no sirens. But in such cities as Nikopol, which is Dnipro region, or in the city of Kharkiv, and everywhere alongside the front lines, Sumy, for example, Russians are still shelling the cities and killing civilians with smaller drones, with FPV drones, and with smaller range missiles. So I was just reading the news before recording it, and there are over 350 cases when Russians started shooting, and Russians violated their own promise and something that they begged us to do. Okay, let's not shell each other. So basically, they are violating it themselves. And the situation at the front line is pretty dangerous still. I was talking to people who are there, and there's no truth there, and there's no ceasefire in the meaning of what I would think that ceasefire is. It meaning nobody shoots, and there's no movement alongside the front line. So that's not the case, no matter what they're saying. Russians are violating it, and Russians were behaving like this even before, when there was the smaller war from 2014 to 2022. Basically, with this big hostilities from 2014 to 2018, every time there were Minsk agreements, Russians would still shoot in, and we would not be responding. So this is something that is not new, but it's just confirming that you cannot trust Russians, and you cannot trust what they're saying. In terms of the front line itself, in Dnipro, it's a little bit better. So there were some places that were regained by the Ukrainian army, and it is with a very high price. So our men and women at the front line are fighting very heroically, and that's I don't know how they cope, how they manage, but with this efforts, Dnipro region frontline is still not moving. In Zaporizhia, it's a little bit worse because the Russians are putting there more resources, and it's a very serious situation. I think they decided that Zaporizhia will be the direction they would try to break like the front line there, and maybe you've seen the meme of Mala Takhmachka. It's a small village in the Zaporizhia region, and every other month Russians would say that they occupied it, but Mala Takhmachka is still in Ukraine. But it's just jokes aside. The situation there is severe. It's very dangerous, and we don't know how this summer campaign will be finishing. And all these talks that I can see in the foreign media, that there are like 99% of chances that the war will be over this year, and like anytime soon Russians will give up, or anytime soon some politicians will force Ukraine to capitulate. We've been there before. I'm very skeptical about it. I hope that Russian economy will just collapse because of this war, and this humiliation that they had this year at the Red Square, it will just gain momentum, and maybe some dissatisfaction will happen there. But there's small hope for this one, but the chances of this war to be over, for example, in the horizon of the next month or two, it's in my opinion, it's still very small, because I don't see any sense of it on the ground. So that's the update. That's what we have for now. I hope that was informative. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. And thank you very much for your support. Thank you for staying with us. And I hope to see you very soon under better circumstances. Goodbye for now.